Welcome to episode 34 of The Martial Truth, my second in a series of interviews with Sensei Patrick McCarthy. McCarthy Sensei's new book, Kensei Kion Chotoku, A Man in His Art, is out. It's available on Amazon. There'll be a link in the description. I highly recommend the book. Outstanding book on Kion Chotoku and the many faceted aspects of his life and his karate life. All right, so highly recommend. Also look at Sensei McCarthy's other books. He's written 9 of them. They're all excellent additions to the library. All right. Once again, as always, please consider becoming a member. The monthly membership's only $2.99. It helps me out, helps the channel out. Also, please click that like button, click that subscribe button, and click that share button. Share the videos. If you like them, share them. All right. With no further ado, part 2 of Sensei Patrick McCarthy, speaking about Kion Chotoku, and this one will cover some of the controversies in Kion's life.
Someone who's become a very dear friend of mine now from Germany is Thomas Feldman, who's again did I don't think there's anything left to know about Ito's uncle based upon Joe Swift and Thomas Feldman's work. I think everything that's ever been known about them has been well documented, and but there's also another guy here in Japan. His name is you would know him. His name is Kono Satoshi, or his author's name is Kono Bin. He's also a Shorin-Ryu stylist, by the way. He's quite high. I think he's seventh or eighth dan, and he's actually really quite well known for writing little detective pocket novels, which are turned into television series.
Okay.
So quite famous on that.
Okay.
But he wrote a book called Chamigua.
Right, which you mentioned in this book.
Right. Yeah, I mentioned it. And he wrote a forward for my book as well, by the way. But he's written about that. But what I love about him, about Kono's book, and it's only just in Japanese, is do you remember some years ago there was a guy named Dr. Clive Layton, not to be confused with PhD Bruce Layton or Clayton. He wrote a book. He wrote this book here called Funagoshi on Okinawa.
Okay.
If you haven't read this book, my God, I gotta tell you, you gotta read it. Now, this guy's written literally a pantheon of publications.
Okay.
And I suppose they might probably appeal more to Shotokan stylists because that's his background. But
right.
And even though Funagoshi is kind of, I guess, regarded as the father of Shotokan, I would probably say that's not actually right. I think Nakayama Masashi with the father of Shotokan, but we'll leave that for another discussion.
Right.
What I liked about the way he did his book was it's kind of like a fact fiction book. He pretended that he was Funagoshi's childhood friend.
Okay.
And hanging out with him all the time. Hey, we woke up this morning, and as I looked out across the East China Sea and felt the breeze of Fujian blowing my mind, that whole.
Right.
I mean, the research was so meticulous. He would go to the Meteorological Association and say, "What was the weather like on Thursday, the 3rd of September, 1879?" And I mean,
right.
and all facts fused into this transformative read about Funagoshi, and I thought. Kono Bin did the same thing with Chamigua. And that's why I thought, and that's what kind of compelled me to look down this other pathway about, because everybody heard Kion Chotoku, son of a wealthy aristocrat who worked for the king in some capacity and like gambling and drinking and fighting. I thought they were talking about a Canadian there for a minute. And he, practiced this, but he was just a country bumpkin.
Right.
Right. Value. And then the interesting dichotomy there is that, if he's just a country bumpkin, how then does he become so intricately involved with the development of Isshin-Ryu, Shorin-Ryu, the Seibukan? I mean, if he was just a country bumpkin, and these guys are. This is some of the best karate arguably in the world, certainly Okinawa, And so I had not thought about going down that pathway of looking at the political infrastructure, cultural impact that the Japanese would have in coming to Okinawa. The political parties, the stubborn party, the pure party, pro-Chinese, anti-Chinese, pro-Japanese. I never thought to look about that. And Kono Bin was the one who kind of said, down this way, just by virtue of what he wrote. And then of course, so Joe Swift, back in, gosh, I don't remember, around 10 years or so ago, came across a series of newspaper articles written in 1898. Four were by the Ryukyu Shimbun, one was by the Kagoshima Times, that had labeled, now they don't say Koto Toku, but they say the third son of
right.
Yeah, it's obvious who he is, right? That he was, he was just the evil deeds of this man, and targeted him as little more than a pimp, and like any researcher, scientist, if you're researching a particular topic and you discover something that's previously unknown, I mean, there's an unwritten code here that you need to inform people of that. I mean, it's because it changes a lot of things,
Well, the other thing is for myself, and I've discussed this with Andreas Quast also, is I want my history warts and all. I mean, these guys are human beings, just like all of us. They make mistakes. They may be, in hindsight, that they regret. Who knows if what that newspaper wrote about Keon is true? Obviously, that newspaper had a serious political agenda. So they looked down on the karate guys initially, which I totally get, because that's a link to the past, and they're trying to modernize. Let's push everybody into this Japan. So again, for me, and I think a lot of people, listen, let's have it all. Let's have it all, and let's decide then what we.
I'll tell you, there's that in sociology. There's that phenomenon known as the Schopenhauerism, which Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, the 3 stages of truth. Look at Machiavelli. Everybody has talked about this over the years, but anytime anyone establishes a practice, a method that supersedes the way some other perhaps long-standing tradition has handled the situation, right away for detractors, they're going to have everybody who's fared well in the old way, and so they are ridiculed for that, and hopefully the ridiculing a person will be enough to shame them, and they'll run away with their tail between their legs. And if the ridiculing doesn't work, then of course the next step is to oppose them. And I suppose in many regards, depending on what's at stake, the opposition can be fatal. It's just And there's that interesting expression here in this heavily Confucian-based culture of conformity, which is don't question authority. That's from filial piety is the first tenet of Confucianism, and there's that wonderful Koto Waza proverb that goes, "Deru kugi wa utareru," or kugi means nail, and kugi means peg. So it's either deru kugi wa utareru or deru kugi wa utareru. And the protruding nail ultimately gets
hammered down.
And metaphorically speaking, and if you're the person who continues protruding or asking the questions or creating the problems, and you don't stay down, they're going to ostracize you, pluck you out. I myself have been a victim of that here and elsewhere.
I can feel your pain a little bit on that one also. So,
interestingly enough, in the early days of my writing and research, I never, I didn't grow up as an academic. I was a high school dropout, for God's sake. So my idea of dealing with betrayal was, So I think I've learned a few things since that time. Not many, but now I see how cleverly obvious this manipulative mindset really is, and how and why, if whatever you represent, threatens the insecurities of anyone. Pull up your pants and tighten the belt because the fight's coming to you.
Yeah.
And whether and the sad part about that is a lot of times, good, honest, pretty decent people who, if they knew the truth, might otherwise say, all right, I wonder why those guys are saying that,
Right.
And so anyway, you have to navigate the waters, the turbulent waters or streams as you best see fit. But I can imagine, going back to Koto Toku, for example, particularly with these 5 articles, I left no rock unturned in every nook and cranny. Look, there wasn't even a shred, not one shred of evidence. Today that allegation would have been thrown out. But in the same way that you could say something like, "Oh my goodness, we're not going to that karate school anymore because that guy's a pedophile, or maybe not a pedophile. Well, that guy has a problem with young children."
Right.
How do you defend yourself against it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
it's tough.
It's not true.
Right.
It never happened. But the smart and unscrupulous enemy, rival, detractor, whatever you want to call it, can conjugate that in a moment. And for folks who don't know, until that's kind of proven the other way, I'm going to stay away from that person.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened back here. Not a shred of evidence. Come on. And here's another interesting thing, and I didn't really write a lot about this, alluded to it more, but and maybe I'll write more about it in the future. But after High Hunchkin, after the abolition of the Ryukyu Kingdom, and by the way, now I want you to know, hey, King Shotai, they didn't, of course he lost his king. I get all that. There's legends and folklore and songs about how sad it was. And I get all that. But I'll tell you, they were living large up in Tokyo.
Oh, yeah. I believe it.
And the sons and all of his pals, and nobody was hurting there. And also helping to facilitate folks coming down from the mainland and exploiting the death out of Okinawan culture and industry and sugarcane, all this stuff. That didn't go to any Okinawan. Okinawan's never going to, by the way. That was, but for another topic, okay? So do you? I mean, and by the way, so you got the king and then his children, prince and princesses, and then under that you got the Sanshikan, the council of three, and then you got the Sanshigan, another subordinate group to this. Then underneath it, you got this whole list of patrons. Satanishi, Chikanon, Suji, and all these type of things, right? And so in this kind of vacuum period of time, there was about, I think there's around 3,000, maybe 3,200 families who were in the patron class area, and this is coming off the top of my head. And then by the time that the stipend had been because there was a little bit of money left in that vacuum period, but by the time the hammer came down, you had like 3,000 families.
Right.
Who've been living off the government with zero.
So
people go north, people become artisans, people go to farming. A lot of people, you don't hear about a lot of people committed suicide. A lot of people turn to drugs and alcohol.
So just to give you an example, in the Sosu Ishiru from Fukuoka, samurai family, the Meiji Restoration hits. Okay, now they're no longer retainers. Now they got to find a job. So they became obi. They made obis for years. But then now, eventually, obis, people don't need as many obis as they did, in the transition period. So, I know like the present headmaster became a construction manager. So again, you got to survive, right? You have to survive. You have to feed your family.
And just on that one thing, let me just say, because this is you could probably do a half a dozen PhD dissertations just on this one little area. And there's just so much here. But for the Kian issue about going up to the mainland and these newspaper articles, I just want to say this. So I'm talking, and I'm not talking about guys who were farmers to start with, or I'm not talking about people who are not. So there are lots of titles, but you can kind of divide Okinawan's population into two, if you would. And this is based on my late 1980s studies on the Takanoya account, 1870, 1890 Takanoya account, where you had what they call Keimochi and Muke. So K means in the families, right? And so you either had a family, you had people who were chronicled, and you had people who were unchronicled, essence, if you will.
Right.
So in the chronicle families, let's talk aristocrats, for example. Could you imagine if you came from a family where you had, say, 5 girls, no boys,
Right.
5 girls, okay? Sorry, let me put that in more practical. 5 mouths to feed,
Right.
in addition to you and your husband, or husband
Right.
and wife. So we'll just say, and maybe that Oji-chan, maybe grandparents. This is Confucian based,
Right.
so people take care of their relatives,
Right.
rather than the West, where can't wait to get out of the house type of thing. And so what you got here, you got a lot of mouths to feed in that house and no income at all. And you can't even go and work because the Japanese have exploited and taken advantage of low. I mean, the stores and every,
Yeah.
So what do you do? You hear, honey, what is that? Well, I just heard from a guy when I was having a couple of glasses of awamori down in Suji the other day, and I heard that on the mainland in I don't think they were calling them brothels then, but
Right.
entertainment
Right.
leisure centers for men. It was called indentured prostitution.
Right.
Okay, time out. I know, and you know.
Right.
By now, we all know that's sexual slavery.
Right.
And we all stand on the right side of the fence. We know.
Right.
Now, this is not about you and me. This is about a historical phenomenon, and then trying to understand it in order to help exonerate somebody else. So let's just stay on that side of the fence for a minute, okay? Indentured prostitution in those days. What is that, honey? Oh, we can rent our daughter. Has to be, coming of age,
Right.
after the period, okay?
Right.
And we can send them up to the mainland. They have both 3 and 5 year contracts, and we're going to get, literally by our standard, a year or 2 of money upfront, cash in our hand, which we will now all be able to survive on. If Nao-chan goes to the mainland, she finishes her 3 years and she's coming back there, because we heard that people around the corner did it a few years ago, and they're so. Do you know how many daughters from aristocratic families went and did that? I mean, the statistics are mind-boggling, but completely understandable, as sad as that may be. Now, how do you get these girls from Okinawa up to the mainland? You weren't taking a helicopter, or so they had to go by steamship. That costs money, okay?
Right.
And you got to remember, people today say, "Oh, he speaks a little bit of Hogan." Okay, that's a fallacy. There's no such thing as Hogan. That's not it's pigeon. No. It's Uchina-guchi, and it is a completely separate language to Japanese.
Right.
While there may be some crossovers, it's
Right.
a completely different language. And anyway, there's a young lady, Canadian, by the way, former student of one of my friends out on the West Coast, Samantha May, who's written a wonderful book. I think it's actually a free download if you're interested in Uchina-guchi. But the fact is this. You need a translator, and you're taking young, beautiful girls with you as well. You need somebody there who's got some, who can serve as a security for these people as well, right? And somebody who's able to deal with, somebody who may want to manipulate the circumstances or take advantage of whatever. Who better suited to do that than someone like Koto Toku?
Right. Right.
He's unemployed. He's a martial arts master.
Right.
Speech. And here's what kills me. He was educated in a school, you can read about it in my book, that would have, at the time, would have been at the same level as Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Georgetown, would have been in that same category. I mean, you look at the guy who's on here, the guy who's on the 1,000 yen notes. The guys on our new 10,000 yen notes coming out, and were his classmates. Kano Jigoro Fanajiro was his classmate. We're talking about Koto Toku was no country bumpkin, man. This guy was a remarkable scholar.
Right. He was a part of the upper class.
Oh,
He's a
anyway,
part of the upper
so
class.
this all this about wiping it off the board and is totally ridiculous. And of course, now the folks who don't know the stuff I just told you, who are here, man,
Right.
they, first of all, men don't even know about that. By the way,
Right.
the few I did speak with, who found this out, went, no. We're not going to go down that pathway. That's not important. But you see, it is important because not only does it exonerate him,
Right.
it reveals the true nature of just how awesome this guy really was.
Right.
And when you look at, and look, I'm not knocking Nahate. I'm just saying to you straight up and down. There's no kind of secrets left in Nahate. We know. Just off the top of my, we know that in I don't know, March 10th, 4 o'clock Saturday, 1867, at the Ochiagoten, there was a sayonara party for Zhao Xin, who was the last Satoshi, heading back to China, and the little bit of drinking, so it's gift giving,
Right.
some Ryukyubuyu dancing, Olori, and Asa music and Sanshin and so on. There was a martial arts demonstration. It was Aragaki. I forgot. I made this. Oh, McCarthy made that up. There was Aragaki Seisho, 1840, 1920. There was Maeda Peichin. There was Tomura Peichin. And there was somebody that we describe him as a Gyugakusei. Gyugakusei means like overseas Chinese student, everything. And there's these items. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did a translation of this like 25 years ago. And Timbei, Rochin,
Right.
pressure points. Oh, Aragaki Seisan, you made it up. He made that.
Right.
And here in the crowd is this kid going, wow, that was pretty awesome. And he goes, hey, I'd love to do some of that. What's your name? My name's not important, but I want to go. It goes, well, it's possible, you could train under this guy. And so Aragaki Seisho takes this young man under his wing for a year, and maybe even a little longer before he realizes, I'm being sent back off to China.
Right.
I'm a translator. I got to go do that. But I'm gonna recommend you to my pal, whose name is Kojo Sai Family Fist, from Fujian. His name is Kojo Taite, Iron Fist, and you can train on him so the first theory is he was under Aragaki Seisho for 3 years. The other theory is 1 year. The other is 1 year and a half. Who cares?
Right.
He trained with the guy, right? And then of course he gets invited to go train with Kojo Taite. Same lineage, by the way, same style. And then he ultimately finds passage to China to train himself. And the story goes that he trained at this one school at the Ryukyu dormitory, and
right.
He didn't like it. Then he found another guy. This other guy was the famous Ruruko, and of course the guy I'm talking about is Higona or Higashiyama Kando, right? So this return of him into Okinawan society is not usually talked much about. They don't say, oh yeah, he come back and he picked up a problem when he was overseas, and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He's a dealer down at the casino, got a bit of a drug problem. They all kind of wash over that type of thing.
Right.
He was an art teacher or so on, and a license. 10 years in Kung Fu is nothing back in the day.
Right.
10 years, you're no longer a beginner anymore after 10 years,
Right.
And then to get what we would call Menkyo Kaiden, it's a year.
Right.
So I'm not, and the same with Weichikamo, So what we now know as the roots of Nahate is this well-known story. We know how it all came together.
Right. But
when we look at the Shorin-Ryu or the so-called Shurite, and let me just take a moment to talk about something for a second about this Nahate Marjorite. Now everybody knows the village principalities around this island. I mean, the island's only 60 miles long, and 120 kilometers long, and 5 at its longest, and so on. It's not a very big place. And back in the day, there was between 500,000 and 600,000 people here, and so. the central area was Shuri. It was the old castle capital,
Right.
and then the workforce was largely in Naha, the most centrally populated area. There's a port there, and there's also the deep water port of Tomari as well. But I mean, come on, there's all down in the south. There's other ports and stuff like that, fishermen, that. So most people, when they talk about karate, they talk about just three areas. They talk about Tomari, they talk about Naha, and now by the way, just as you know, Naha swallows up everything today.
Right.
Shuri is in Naha, Tomari is in Naha, but back in the day, everybody knows Funagoshi Gishin made mention in a single passage of this is Nahate and these are the dynamics, and that's Shurite and this is Tomarite. I put forth a thing some years ago about Kano Jigoro came here in January of 1927 to inaugurate the Okinawan Judo Yudanshikai, judo organization for the school system. And while he was here, he was a dignitary. He got the special treatment, all that type of stuff. I just wrote, actually, I think I just wrote something recently about it. Lance Gatling, who is Lieutenant Colonel, retired. Lance Gatling has been in Japan forever, who's really a remarkable authority on everything Kano related, and in addition to being a prominent martial artist himself, was extremely helpful for me because I was trying to track down the Ishida Shinzo, so-called judo contest between him and Tian,
right, in Taiwan.
So that's another story. Okay,
right.
So I'm looking at this. I'm thinking, in the latter part of 1926, as they were trying to organize a cultural committee trying to organize Kano's visit, and there were other people with Kano on that trip, by the way, and people who had left early before he even left, who were his students and military guys and stuff like that, said, okay, look, while he's here, he's got to do this, he's got to go there, we got to go up to the Shuri Castle, we got to have some drinks, give him some surround, let's show him what Okinawa is all about. And in addition to that, he was going to watch some people demonstrate. Now, you got to keep in mind, he'd already seen Funagoshi Gishin, so and they become friends or colleagues, I guess. And Kano was interested in clothes. Remember, clothes fit. Kobushi was not a. I mean, you see it in some of the old. I have a dear friend of mine, Phil Hinshelwood from Australia. He's a Shihan in Yagyu Shingan-Ryu, not Yagyu Shinkagiru, Shingan-Ryu. Heihojitsu. So, and I mean, I know the way that he strikes. We're your friends. But this idea of clenching your fist with the thumb on the outside to make percussive impact with it, that's an unknown phenomenon. Right. We can talk later about the 1921 story by Sasaki Gogai that Funagoshi Gishin refers to in his the last pages of his 1922 book on karate. We'll talk about that later. But so this issue about Kano, Japanese. I used to make a mistake and call him but he was not an aristocrat, by the way.
Right.
But, father educator, IOC, I mean, a man who would help change the face of old school martial art practices on the mainland to use as a mechanism to funnel physical fitness to social conformity, especially during this period of radical military escalation. Kano was a really important person. So we're not going to send anything Chinese over to, hey, let's bring the Chinese down and have a celebration of Chinese martial arts today. That's probably going to go over very well at all in this period of time. So they say, and you remember very well, in those days, it wasn't called karate as we know it today. Right. That was Hanashiro Shomo in 1905, which is my teacher's teacher, was the first person to use sora or empty.
Empty.
But that was largely in a treatise to discussing how you fought with the empty hands, what that was about. It never became etched in stone, this empty hand fighting art, not until after 1936. And so at the time, what became really, really quite important was the fact that Chinese TDT, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, was the fighting art. And we know from as early as, I mean, my first recollection before I started learning more about the Marindo school that he had created was Nagamine Shoshin's book, translated by my colleague, Professor Shinzato Katsuhiko. And in that book, Junsoku Sanshikan, originally from Kume, but became better known for being in Nago, the Nago Uekata. He writes a very important message, and he used the fighting arts to help children in the same way that sports and other cultures are used to help condition the body, cultivate the mind, nurture the spirit. So too did he use tea for kids. And he said, and he's very famous for this passage, it's not enough that you practice your tea on a daily basis when contrasted to your behavior in daily life.
Right. This will end part 2 of my series of interviews with Sensei Patrick McCarthy. All right. In parts 3 and 4, we'll get even further into the Kion Chotoku book and all the different aspects that McCarthy Sensei delves into there. So again, please click the like, share, subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.